As we pivot tonight, I'm excited to introduce another example for our community. We are so lucky and fortunate to have Wall Street Journal national politics reporter and CNN political analyst Sabrina Siddiqui join us today. Prior to joining CNN, Ms. Siddiqui was a White House correspondent at The Guardian. She covered both the 2016 and 2012 presidential election and Congress for Huffington Post. Her work has appeared in Bloomberg News and also Business Week. For those of you that do not know, 4 years ago, she joined an esteemed panel of Muslim American journalists to discuss being Muslims in their industry. It was one of the first events organized by AMI. We are so happy to have her back and to celebrate her success. Her reporting is paving the way for other American Muslims to enter the industry. While we welcome her remarks, we are excited to know more about what the last 4 years has been, not only as an American Muslim journalist, but as a journalist in general, especially given the outgoing administration's relationship with the press and feelings towards Muslims. Ms. Siddiqui, we are very lucky to have you today. Please.
Good evening, and thank you so much to AMI for giving me the opportunity to speak with all of you today. Assalamu alaikum. I really appreciate having this forum to discuss a topic that I think is very important around representation, especially in the media. I've been covering national politics for 10 years now. During that time, I've had the opportunity to cover 3 presidential elections, 3 midterm elections, both majorities in Congress, as well as 2 presidents. And throughout most of it, I've been one of just a handful of Muslim journalists on the scene. Now, that's not something that I say as a badge of honor. To me, it is a reflection of the glaring lack of representation across newsrooms in the United States, and especially in political reporting, which has a profound impact on both public perception as well as progress as a society and a country. Now, that lack of diversity and representation is not new, but it is certainly a challenge that arose time and again over the last 6 years when the candidacy and then the presidency of Donald Trump tested news organizations in ways they had not been tested before. As I chronicled in an essay a few years ago, covering the 2016 election as a Muslim reporter was not easy. It was arguably the first campaign in which the rhetoric that we had often seen that was rooted in Islamophobia and picking up steam on the fringes of the Republican Party became part of the mainstream. I remember covering, as I'm sure many people also remember hearing, then candidate Donald Trump's pledge to ban all Muslims from entering the United States, or his flirtation with the prospect of a Muslim registry, or even Ben Carson, another Republican candidate's statement that he did not believe a Muslim should ever be president because their values would be at odds with the US Constitution. These were just some of the statements that became national news, but really reflected a much more entrenched philosophy toward Muslims that was picking up steam in at least one party and having a profound impact on Muslim communities across the country. And then when Trump assumed office and became president, not much really meaningfully changed in terms of his outlook toward Muslims. One of his very first acts was to impose a limited travel ban on Muslim majority countries. And the statements he often made as president, again, trafficked in stereotypes about Muslims or were designed to stoke fears about Muslims within society, whether it was his assertion that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar or Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, two of the first 2 Muslim women elected to Congress, should go back to where they came from, or his willingness to immediately pounce every time there was a terrorist attack and point fingers at Muslims before anything was even known about the identity of the attackers, and to use that as an excuse to try and advance policy targeting Muslim civil rights. Inside of the newsrooms, as we covered those events, oftentimes I was one of the only Muslims there. And it was the same experience I know for my colleagues who are Muslim journalists at other news organizations. We had to be the ones to often talk about what the impact of those statements were and the kind of impact that they had on communities, the fear that those communities were living in, the rise in hate crimes or Islamophobic thought, and just placing that into a broader context to talk about not just how we cover those stories, but in some cases, why we needed to cover them at all. I think that is exactly why we need more Muslim representation inside of newsrooms across the country. I was heartened in the 2020 election to see that there were more Muslims on the campaign trail. I remember one event with Joe Biden in Iowa where there were 4 Muslims there, including myself, and it seemed like this incredible feat. But it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be an anomaly when there is more than one Muslim journalist inside of the White House press room or on the campaign trail or inside the hallways of Capitol Hill. It should be more common to see diverse faces and, more importantly, to have diverse voices at the table. Now, the onus also falls on newsrooms, of course, to try and diversify their staff. And it's not an excuse to simply say we don't have enough Muslim candidates or enough candidates of color and to put the blame on the applicants. We have to go and seek them out. We have to go and recruit them. We have to go to job fairs or set up job fairs even inside of their communities. We have to go find them when we go to universities and make the kind of visits you do to try and encourage more people to pursue a career path in journalism. And that is something that I know that more newsrooms are trying to do after a year that was dominated by protests around racial justice and that really exposed the lack of diversity, not just inside of newsrooms, but also inside of every institution and organization across the country. I also think, though, that we need to have more of a dialogue within our own communities and encourage people to pursue non-traditional career paths and to understand that the value of being at that table is that is how we make our voices heard. It doesn't have to be inside of a newsroom. There are many other industries where we could stand to have more representation. But there is a lot of frustration in the Muslim community, understandably so, about how Muslims are covered by the media. And we can complain about the stereotypes about Muslims. We can work together to fight them. But the only way to eradicate them is to have a seat at the table ourselves. Whether it's as a reporter, whether it's as an editor, whether it's as a social media manager, there are many roles that we can pursue. But without actually trying to be part of the conversation, then we can't really change the way in which we are talked about or the way in which we are portrayed. And so I would encourage everyone to have those conversations and to really push, not just push for diversity, but to actually be part of the movement and to be part of that change by, again, understanding that the real way for us to eradicate these stereotypes is to have a seat at the table ourselves. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. Assalamu alaikum.